Okay, welcome to this last session of this conference devoted to the follow-up to the Conference on the Future of Europe organized by the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence Future here at eCampus University. We closed this conference with a roundtable with some MEPs, and we would like to thank them very much for being with us. And as we have been discussing their work for days, as most of the paper in the conference has been comparing the proposal coming out of the Conference on the Future of Europe and the proposal that the European Parliament has approved last November regarding treaty change. So the new Parliament now will have the task, if it will decide to do so, to bring forward that proposal. And so we are very happy to greet Daniel Freund, an MEP from the Green Party. He was one of at the forefront of the battle to reform the treaty. He's also a member of the Spinelli Group, which gathered the most prominent pro-European and federalist MEPs in the parliament, and which has been very instrumental in that work within the Constitutional Affairs Committee to bring forward a comprehensive treaty reform proposal. So Daniel, thank you very much for being with us. I will give you the floor straight away with a couple of questions that I would like you to take on. The first one is what is going on in the parliament now, beside the preparation of new commission and so on, with regards to taking on again the challenge to try and start a treaty reform procedure. The second one regards if the parliament plan to act with regards to the fact that the European Council is basically violating the treaties, because Article 48 gives the Parliament the power to initiate a treaty reform procedure, and the Parliament proposal has been transmitted to the European Council last December. So now it's 9 months that they are on the table of the European Council. There have been 5 meetings of the European Council, and it was never put on the agenda, which clearly violates both Article 48 and the principle of loyal cooperation among EU institutions. And so maybe there is room for the Parliament to act on this ground as well towards the European Court of Justice with regard to this violation by the European Council. And the third one is about the new composition of the parliament and how this new balance of forces may influence the parliament resolve to take up the struggle once more. Daniel, you have the floor.
Well, thanks so much, Roberto, for the invitation. Hello, everyone. Some of these questions I cannot really answer yet. We're still in the very first days of this new parliament. I mean, we basically had one plenary in July where we re-elected the Commission President. This parliament is still sort of getting settled, getting to know each other, re-establishing networks. We didn't have quite as much turnover as we had in 2019, but there are a number of new members where, you know, we don't know yet where they stand. What we can see, of course, in the overall shift of majorities is that there has been a rightward shift in the parliament. We now have 3 Eurosceptic political groups in the parliament. We have the Patriots, so Orban, Le Pen, and other MEPs that have, you know, basically taken much of the old ID group extended by Orban's Fidesz now. We have the ECR, so PiS and Fratelli d'Italia. And we have a new group with mostly the German AfD that was kicked out of the ID group just before the elections, right? And what does that mean? Well, obviously, there are now more anti-federalist, anti-EU members and parties represented in the European Parliament. But the other thing that has happened majority-wise is that we have lost the progressive majority in the House, right? So in the last mandate, the Social Democrats, Liberals, Greens, and Left had a majority in the parliament, and this is no longer the case. So in a way now, the European People's Party, the EPP, is always needed together with the progressives to form majorities. And I think on all these things, treaty change, federalization, changing the electoral law towards more, transnational lists and such things, we have seen that in the last mandate, it was usually the EPP sort of where the border between yes and no was somewhere in the EPP. Some conservatives were still with us, but depending on what the exact question was, parts of the EPP was against. Part of the EPP voted against the treaty change report. Part of the EPP voted against the transnational list electoral reform. So given that now nothing works without the EPP, obviously all these reform debates don't exactly become easier. And in a way, it's even more severe, I would say, in the council, where at this point, the number of governments that are led by liberals, social democrats, or Greens is becoming ever smaller. So I would say, when the conference ended, when Macron on the 9th of May, a couple of years ago, presented the results of the conference on the future of Europe, we in the European Parliament took this very seriously. It was a long process to translate the outcome of the conference into concrete amendments of the treaty. And I would actually be very curious to hear from you guys, particularly those that have apparently, from a scientific point of view, analyzed how well our translation exercise was. I'd be very, very curious to hear the verdict of how well my job as one of the rapporteurs of this report was. I didn't do it alone. In some cases, I did not manage to get what I wanted, but I bear political responsibility for part of the work that we did there. So I'd be very curious to hear. But I think by and large, the proposal that the Parliament has made is ambitious and quite good. You have already said since then nothing has happened. The Council hasn't even officially discussed our proposal, has not adopted, not rejected, not altered in any way, not even debated this proposal. And you asked me, what can we do about this? And quite honestly, I'm not so sure, other than arguing in favor or waiting for the world further pushing the necessity of treaty change onto us. I'm not sure there's that much that we can do. You have mentioned a possible court case for not sincere cooperation against the Council. I'm not sure. I mean, legally speaking, you could possibly do that. Politically, I don't think this can ever go where we want this to go. It's a bit of the attempt, if a marriage has fallen apart, taking your wife to court and forcing her to love you again is impossible, right? And I think suing the Council into starting a constructive debate about treaty reform with us, I fear is equally difficult, if not impossible, right? So I think at the end of the day, we have to win the hearts and minds in the Council and convince them that this is truly necessary and the right way to go. Ideally, I would not like to wait, for such eventualities as Ukraine disappearing, Russia attacking an EU member state, Trump going back to the White House, or any of these things, that would further show to everyone the need for additional integration, for us working, as Europeans working closer together on things like defense or migration or the fight against climate change and all that. I would hope that people understand that there is need for working closer together. I think we have also seen, from my point of view, I would say, that on the one hand, that debate in the Council has shifted a bit towards, if you ask 2 years ago in the Council who's ready for treaty change, there was no one. Now there is at least a group of governments, but we still don't have a majority. And depending on how the next national elections go, if the FPÖ comes to power in Austria or such things, this can also further regress, of course. But I think at the end of the day, we have to win the argument that these kind of reforms are necessary, and that if we want the union to survive, and if we want to address the kind of continental challenges that we face, and where citizens also expect from us that we address those challenges, that we can only address them together with reform, that at some point we'll just have to do it.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, as you asked, academics are very strict, but I guess overall we'll give you a pass. In the sense that we appreciated the fact that the AFCO proposal was much closer to the conference proposal than what was actually approved in the plenary. So, of course, in the various papers that were focusing on the various priority of the conference and comparing the two texts, of course, there was also this acknowledgement of the fact that the work that was done by the AFCO was much closer to the conference than what was approved by the plenary. At the same time, of course, there were also the highlight of what were the main area in which the parliament was less ambitious than the citizen in the Conference on the Future of Europe. And basically, this appeared paradoxically on democracy, because the proposal of the conference was to abolish unanimity everywhere except for new accession and the modification of the values of the Union enshrined in Article 2 and the Charter of Rights. While eventually the Parliament proposal continued to keep unanimity also on fiscal power, defense, and some of the crucial issues that in the conference the citizen precisely asked to get rid of unanimity in those issues, because those are the area where we have a paralysis in the Union action. So from that point of view, while overall it's clear that the inspiration of the proposal of the Parliament comes from the Conference of the Future of Europe, it's also clear that political consideration brought the Parliament to take a less ambitious overall stand. And this happened also regarding direct democracy, because the AFCO text included the proposal 39 number 2 regarding the European referendum, and the plenary took it out. So the European referendum is not part of the proposal. On that, we also have a discussion that if a European referendum with double majority is established, that would probably be the best way to have as a ratification tool, because once you have established a European referendum to be used on matter particularly important for European citizens as such, nothing is more relevant for a European citizen as a European citizen than treaty reform. So this should become the new ratification method. This was one of the issues that was discussed at the conference. So as you asked, this is an overall picture. Another question I would like to pose you is regarding what you said about the change balance in the Parliament and in the Council, European Council. In the past, European integration went ahead thanks to the strength of the member states. So when there were strong member states that wanted more integration, we managed to go ahead. Delors managed to get the monetary union thanks to the support by Kohl and Mitterrand. Today, we see that European member states are as weak as they have never been, everywhere. The governments are very weak in most countries. The challenges they are facing, they're always asking for the European Union to act. Even the nationalists, they always complain that the European Union doesn't do enough on this or that. And it looks that more than before, it will be up to the supranational institution, the Parliament and the Commission, to try and take the lead, because probably they have, compared to the past, a more favorable balance of forces to the member states than in the past. And I wonder if this is a way that is seen also by the Parliament and in the bubble.
I'm not sure if I share this. I'm not sure that if you look, through the last EU treaties, how the role of the European Parliament has evolved. I don't think that was the explicit wish of strong member states to, in a way, increase the role of parliament. I think that is something that parliament very much has fought for, and that national parliamentarians have helped here and there, and that maybe ultimately governments didn't stand in the way hard enough to block it. But I really don't think that that things like the European Citizens Initiative exist, that the European Parliament and its current powers exist the way it does. None of this is down to governments having pushed for this. The question of whether governments are strong or not, I mean, it's interesting what you say, that governments are weak today, because at home, the situation in many member states is fragile. Finding political majorities has become more difficult with fragmentation. The voters shift more quickly today than maybe 30 years ago. At the same time, I would say that if you look at the EU power distribution, governments and member states have not been this strong in at least 15 years. If you look at the power dynamics we currently see between Ursula von der Leyen and the member states in the nomination of commissioners, you very clearly see, that already in 2019, in a way, because von der Leyen was not the candidate resulting from the European election, she was not the candidate that resulted of a process from the European Parliament. Already there was a shift towards the Council and the member states' governments. And I think with this election and with the process as it is going at the moment, this shift is going even further. Where 5 years ago, von der Leyen was saying, I want 2 names for each member state and then be able to pick a gender-balanced commission. Now, many of the member states are just saying, no, you're taking this one, and that's it, end of discussion. So I would very much see, also, for example, with the way that the Corona Recovery Fund, the RRF, was established, it's for me yet another example of, this is not inside the union method. The European Parliament has little to say or nothing to say on how this money is being spent. Further increase of the role of member states, even if those governments back home are increasingly weak. And I think precisely because they are increasingly weak at home, precisely because there is a rise of anti-European forces in many member states, there is a bit, I would say, the fear that these governments are, in a way, on the one hand, they're absolutely needed in order to trigger any kind of reform procedure, yet they feel, too weak to control it or to bring it to a good end. So then they say, look, we're not going to do a convention, we're not going to do a debate, because, who knows? There are those that argue that in any case, we cannot bring it to a good conclusion because people like Viktor Orban will just veto. There are others that say, if we open this Pandora's box, look, you have so many anti-European nationalists now in positions of power, they will basically destroy the union in that process. What happens if we regress in a way on integration? But too many that are either afraid or for other reasons now against any kind of modification. And I think that in a way leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy, because precisely those political forces that are against the union, they point to failures of the union to act on problems that citizens have. That we have no control or too little control over migration and asylum, is because we haven't integrated far enough. The whole debate about the economic situation, particularly during the financial and euro crisis, we integrated the currency and we created the euro, but we never integrated economic policy, fiscal policy, stimulus, and all that. And when we experienced the downsides in a way of having the common currency but no possibility for a joint economic response, if you in a way we have stopped integration sort of halfway. And now the question is a bit, do we complete integration and address the shortcomings of half integration, or do we go back? And I would sort of argue that, in this half integration, if national member states have their own currency, their own economic policy, fiscal, and so on, that can work. I think it makes us weaker as tiny countries towards China, Russia, or the US, but it can work as a system. So the nationalists, in a way, do have a point there. I think we're stronger together and we should do it together. But then we need to do full integration. We need not only to integrate the currency, but also the rest. And in a way, what Mitterrand and Kohl agreed in the 90s, that we do the euro, great. But they then didn't have the force to do the rest as well. And even today, 30 years after, or 20 years after the full integration of the euro, we still haven't managed to integrate the rest. And we're still sort of every time patching together those holes in a way in the system that we have created.
Thank you, Daniel. I will give the floor to Antonio Argenziano and then to Professor Luca Barani for a few questions to you for Daniel. And Antonio Argenziano was part of the roundtable. He's Vice President of European Movement International and member of the Executive Board of the Union of European Federalists. So I'm sure that his answer to Daniel Freund, if we need to go back or to complete the integration of Europe, is definitely on the last side. Antonio, you have the floor.
Yes, hello everyone. Hi Roberto and all of you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you also Daniel for the analysis that you just made. I have to say I really agree with you when it comes to the evaluation you made about the role of member states. I think this is a very real issue in terms of member states are kind of losing the grip at home and of being scared. And so if you're scared, you tend to be more conservative. And we're seeing it already from of course, not only institutionally, but we're seeing it also electorally when all Europe is progressively shifting more conservative, more right, because there is a lot of fear also in terms of our capacity to deal with the future, to deal with the challenges, to deal with war, to deal with problems that actually we didn't take into consideration until 2019, to be honest. And actually, this new decade has been kind of a bit of a slap in all our faces in terms of what's the real deal, and also what's the role of European Union. And we are still here wondering what's the best solution. In my opinion, the role of the European Parliament is going to be key for one reason, because we are seeing everywhere the executives taking the lead and centralizing more and more decision making, and parliaments being put aside. For example, national parliaments are taking less and less legislative initiative. This is also, there is a coherent statistics in all the member states that it's more and more the governments proposing legislation instead of than the parliaments. And also on the other side, it's also this new politics that is very much influenced, not new anymore. Politics that is very much influenced by communication, debates, social media, and etc. is very much like the place for taking time for a debate is much shorter. News tend to go fast, and so it's more complicated to let's say there is always this talks about strong people, strong decision making, fast decision making, and so on. And there's this illusion that governments can provide that, but it's not the case. When it comes to, and going to the topic, also linking my reflection to the introduction that Roberto made, I think that from this point on, of course the topic of treaty change will stay on the table, but I think, and also because it's clear what was the output of the Conference on the Future of Europe, but the output of the Conference on the Future of Europe is one of the many voices that we're getting about the need for Europe to change. Letta said it. Draghi is saying this very clearly in these days, according to the first spoilers that we are getting from the report, and more or less we're guessing what is written there, and in general, it's a bit clear. I think there are going to be two urgency, not two crises, because as Daniel said, we had enough crises. We cannot hope for Trump to be re-elected to improve European Union, because if Trump gets re-elected, it's a problem. It's not an opportunity. I think that we have two big topics, two big challenges to try to change the way possibly in the next years. First is a debate on defense, and also this was already faced by the citizens in the conference. And I think it's very important that debate on defense is not only reduced to a debate about industrial harmonizations, more or less, on certain programs around military developments, but it has to be a more comprehensive debate. And I think this has to be also a role to bring this up. To clarify, using, of course, already what was in the conference, and I think this is very interesting, using already the debate that you had, for example, Daniel, as a co-rapporteur already in the previous parliament. What are the topics to define what we mean for European defense? What is the standard that the parliament should accept when we're discussing European defense? Because this is a very urgent topic to face, and we cannot wait for a formal treaty change to have an idea about what's the goal. Let's understand what's the goal, and then we understand also what's the best way to lead towards that, if there has to be a new treaty, if there has to be through a convention, and what's on and whatsoever. Already having in mind that these changes are going to happen, also because, of course, enlargements are going to happen, and that's like the last deadline for treaty change, essentially. And quickly, because I don't want to take too much time, the other big topic is, of course, competitivity. Already mentioned the two reports that came out over summer, let's say beginning and end of summer, but also the budget discussions. In a couple of years, we're going to be in the in the times where essentially the new MFF is going to be discussed. And is the Next Generation EU going to be renewed or not? Are some of these principles going to be taken in and put forward or not? This is going to have a massive impact on the future of Europe, also when it comes to the perception of Europe, because if we get citizens used to a certain amount of investments from the European side, let's say like that, and then the budget is cut in half in the worst case scenario, let's say, then, I mean, this is going to have, this is a political decision, and it's going to have an impact. So I think this, and this is also connected again to the conference, because in the conference there were a lot of references, not necessarily only to the fiscal capacity of the European Union, but also in general to the public goods that European Union should provide to its citizens, and so on and so forth. Last thing, just to remind us, in the last report from the European Parliament think tank, the cost of not having a fiscal union is 2.8 trillion per year. Maybe saying this out and loud to also our constituencies, it's also something, and to our governments, it's also something important to do. So in my opinion, we need to clarify what are going to be the expected goals, and the Parliament should clarify what are going to be the expected goals on these two main topics, at least, so that also then the how it can be implemented and agreed with the new parliament, giving time to the new parliament to engage, to start engaging and entering into the legislation, and on the other side to have cards to deal with the government, just to provide the view, because my fear is that the governments are very good at blocking but are not very good at leading the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Professor Luca Barani from the Università Libre de Bruxelles also has a question for Daniel Freund, so you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Because I also wanted to mention the fact that it's not only a problem of, as you mentioned, that anti-federalist or anti-European movements are gaining grounds, is also the mistakes of the few leaders that, in principle, national leaders that were for the, for instance, for reform change. I mean, I'm thinking about Macron, because it was very striking, because you're one of the main sponsors for the conference of the future of Europe, at least rhetorically. But the very day that at the European elections results in France were confirming what was everybody was expecting. So a new gains for Rassemblement National. He went on TV at 8. So basically, he sucked all the publicity of the EP results and announced the dissolution of the parliament and new elections, which resulted 50 days after. So basically, yesterday or 2 days ago, in a government which is hostage basically to Rassemblement National. So there is also self-inflicted mistakes from the national leaders that, at least initially, were for a more at least a more assertive or more sovereignty or more autonomy for the European Union. And so this is also a major development. So basically, Macron went full circle from being the savior of Europe in 2017, when he cut to size the far right in France, to become now a hostage of the same political party. So this, in my view, is also a very worrying trend.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Luca.
and
Daniel, you have the
actually,
floor.
yeah, I would add that if you look at my own chancellor, Olaf Scholz, on paper, both the coalition, but also him, the SPD, are all pro reform federalist movements. But the German chancellor has done nothing at all to advance any of these debates. And actually, the one time he spoke about European issues when he was in Prague, the first proposal he comes with is, look, Germany needs more MEPs. I mean, that's a good way to kill off any kind of reform debate with any other, even pro-reform government in the EU. So yeah, you're absolutely right on the role of Macron and some of the other leaders. And ultimately, I think for me, when I look at the debate, particularly on the veto, you have leaders, and even, for example, someone like Tusk now in Poland is arguing, look, but we need the veto ultimately to protect our sovereignty, our national interest. And I think leaders in Europe, I mean, there's always a difficult move when you have to give up some powers that you formally hold, right? But the thing is, for me, ultimately, if you look at the Brexit debate, the biggest illusion that the Brexiteers got, completely wrong was this whole take back control, because the control was lost, not because anything of Europe, but quite the opposite. If you want to have control over things like climate change, the behavior, if large corporations still pay any taxes, things like migration, no member state can do this alone. And sovereignty actually only is possible if we work together as Europeans. So the question that leaders ultimately have to answer, of course, formally speaking, they give up the right then to veto things at the EU level. But the question is, do they have a role in a strong union, and they have their democratic powers and their vote share and all that? Or do they hold a veto, but in a union that is dysfunctional and increasingly doesn't matter? Because if we don't make that step, if we don't further integrate, if we don't get rid of vetoes on important decisions like defense, like taxation, and the budget, I would say, I think we're going to be irrelevant. I think we're going to be crushed. I think we're going to just not matter between China, India, the US, and so on. So I think that's the debate that we need to have. Unfortunately, I have to leave you now. sorry for that. I have another engagement urgently here in Brussels now. But if there are any further unanswered questions, don't hesitate to send me an email or get in touch over social media. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Daniel, for being with us, and especially for the work that you do in the parliament, that you did and that you do and you will do in this legislation in the parliament. So thank you so much for being with us. As like in the last couple of days, due to the bad weather we had and the flooding, some of the people that were supposed to come in person didn't manage to join. And some of the people that were supposed to join online seem to have some technical problem, like Brando Benifei, who wrote that he's trying to connect, but he's having some technical problem. He hopes he's sorted out soon, so he should join us hopefully in a few minutes. So I would like to give Antonio Argenziano the floor once more for an assessment of the situation, because you, in your first intervention, pointed out the big issue that we need, on which we need to have a discussion. But as you also are a leading figure in the European Movement International and the Union of European Federalists, what are you planning to do as federalists to try and build those debates and push the European institution to promote those debates and to start some one way or another reform process?
Yes, thank you, Roberto. I'll try to answer to your question. I think I will start from the point I was discussing before. So from where I think the two main priorities are in terms of debate that are coming, because I think that when it comes to political decision making, we have several assets, and we need to understand what are the assets that we have. And usually for political actors like us, that are organizations that are also based on ideological work, I think it's very important to try to win in terms of timings. And so in having clear ideas when the problems will come, so try to anticipate what are going to be the bigger debates before anyone else comes there. I think this is usually a good way to be effective, where we don't have like big possibility to organize huge mobilization in a short period of time because of lack of maybe other instruments. So from this point of view, I think it is very important to look also to have a look over several years and to have a strategy and to understand what is coming from this point of view. And again, now I see that this topic of the defense is happening, and from that point of view, for example, with the European Movement International, we are doing one exercise. We do not think that we need to reinvent the wheel every time. Actually, everything already has been discussed, and a lot of problems that we think to have now, actually, we have solutions from our past, from our history. So one thing that we will do is to trying to re-elaborate what could be which could be the solutions for which could be the definition, the standard for European defense, starting from the Treaty on European Defense of the 50s and reactualizing it. It was also a rather short one, but very detailed, to understand what can be solutions that we can adapt today, and to open also the side debates that need to happen. Again, with this, with two big caveats and with two big points. We cannot allow the European, I'll be repetitive, but we cannot allow the debate on European defense just being a debate on industrial policy. And on the other side, we cannot, of course, detach the reflection on European defense from what's actually happening, and in particular from the role of Europe as an actor of peace. And from this point of view, I think that also fostering the activities and supporting of Ukraine and fostering the dialogue between, for example, Israel and Palestine, I think is also going to be rather important. Now I am in Ventotene, and yesterday there was a very, very important moment on the side of the Ventotene seminar that is held here every year, because Jeff, so Young European Federalist, organized a small debate with two federalist activists, one from Israel and one from Palestine, who were there side by side, talking and trying to analyze the situation and also to tell about what's happening. And they were not only saying, what's happening now, they were not only sharing their stories, they were also trying to share what could be a possibility. And a possibility from their point of view was, for example, to reflect beyond the two-state solution. So maybe trying to give this perspective is also something that we can do. And this is, again, also with the European Movement International, definitely something that we would like to, we already discussed, and we would like to work on, to offer an alternative and a model. On the other side, as you know, and Roberto already mentioned, the Federalists are still pushing for a treaty change to happen as soon as possible, possibly to keep awake this hope that the Council will will open a convention on as a follow-up of the Parliament voting the triggering Article 48. I personally start to be very pessimistic about that is going to happen, but I think that it's good to remind that the Parliament did something, and we need to understand what to do to protect also the Parliament in a way, because if the Parliament keeps did something so important and then it just and can be ignored by the Council, it's really a bad sign. And last but not least, I think that we need to start a discussion, and this is still instead ongoing, start a discussion about to get ready for all the massive topics that will be opened for the discussion of the new budget. It's coming, and having ideas about what are the priorities, starting for sure from the Draghi and Letta report, is definitely something that we need to do. From this point of view, also with DMI will produce a policy paper on the two reports as soon as, of course, also the Draghi report will be published, not without the need to analyze everything, but just stressing what are the main points to pursue to improve the European Union as soon as possible, having in mind that, of course, all the discussion about enlargement needs to go on, and we need to reform the European Union a way or another before the enlargement happens, or let's say in a parallel way, let's say, but we cannot just wait for the treaties, for the just ratifications essentially of enlargement for just minor changes. I don't think this is absolutely the way. And also, raising awareness on this, it's rather important.
Thank you, Antonio. Your comments suggest a few ideas that I would like to submit to you, hoping that in the meantime also Brando will join us. The first one, starting from the last, enlargement. Officially, the European Union said that the timetable for enlargement is to manage the enlargement process by 2030. This means that treaty reform needs to be done in this legislature, 2024-2029, because you need also to ratify that before the enlargement takes place. And also there is a lot of discussion about the enlargement if to follow the Big Bang approach, like in 2004, or based on merit, one by one, and so on. I think that there is a strong underestimation of the fact that one by one, it means that the first join and the second doesn't. Because if someone from the Western Balkan joins first, we put a veto for the other to join. Because the relationship between the aspirant member states in the Western Balkans are so bad. They all want to join the European Union, but they all dislike each other, that if you let one in, he will put that country will put a veto on the next one to join. So either they take a Big Bang approach, or the enlargement process will probably fail. And this is something that should be taken into account. The second aspect is that without treaty change and without the overcoming of unanimity, with the kind of difference that we have now, because it's true that the countries that joined in 2004 were very different from the previous member states, but we should not underestimate the amount of heterogeneity that we would still get with this new enlargement in terms of political culture, stable institution, and so on. So the need to overcome unanimity in the whole decision-making system before this enlargement takes place is even more urgent than it was in 2004. The second aspect that I think is probably will require a stronger linkage than you mentioned is the issue of the budget with defense and energy. Because if there may be an incentive or a push for member states to go forward with European integration in certain area, is the fact that they don't have the money to do it. And this is clearly very clear on the defense sector, because Europeans on average now spend 1.6% of GDP for defense, so below the 2% minimum threshold by NATO. Now, there are countries like Italy that are now under excessive deficit procedure that would have a huge difficulty in reaching 2% of GDP for defense. There are countries that to keep their current military situation, like France, will need to increase their investment at a time in which they also are under an excessive deficit procedure, and will be very difficult even to maintain the current military expenditure. At the same time, you have, on the other hand, countries that are spending more than 4% of GDP, basically the countries that have border with Russia or with Ukraine, so Poland and the Baltics, and Finland. So the situation is very strange, but most of European countries don't have a public opinion in favor of increasing military expenditure at all, nor are in the financial condition to do that. Even the German attempt to create a fund outside of the budget was cut by the Constitutional Court. So even that didn't work. So I think that we need to work on tools that can create an incentive for member states to invest on European defense rather than on national defense. And this for two reasons. The first one is to increase the military expenditure at national level will not solve the problem of European security. Because today, the 27 member states together spend 45% of the American with a capacity of 10%. This means that more than 2/3 of our military expenditure doesn't produce any security, because we have 27 national defense rather than having one European one. So the issue of creating European defense means that it allows us to get more security spending the same amount of money. And I think that we also the Federalist Organization, the European Movement International, should look at the precedents. And one of the most important one is the Juncker Plan, the European Funds for Strategic Investment. Because when the European Union set up that fund, they also took the decision, the Commission, that all national contribution to the fund will not be calculated in the calculation of the structural deficit of the member states. Now, there are many countries that are asking military expenditure to be taken out of the Stability and Growth Pact. And this is not happening. It's not in the new Stability and Growth Pact. But if there was an agreement that the national contribution to the European Defense Fund, the European Defense Agency, the Permanent Structural Cooperation on Defense Projects, and the European Peace Facility were deducted out of the Stability and Growth Pact, then you will create a huge incentive for member states to invest on the European defense rather than on national defense. And this would overcome the mistrust problem. We discussed this in a session yesterday, that the main problem is the mistrust among member states. This was Professor Barani, one of Professor Barani insights. And this was the reason why in the past, all proposal to take out of the calculation some kind of national expenditure investment or green investment, whatever, was never accepted. Because each member state is afraid that all the other would do greenwashing or label change and put all kind of current expenditure under the label that is deducted. While when you put the money into a European fund that everybody managed together, everybody has the guarantee that that money will really go to the original purpose for which the deduction was intended. So I think that this probably is one of the most promising way to create an incentive for the member states to really pursue the integration in the military field. The second point is about energy, because you mentioned the cost of non-Europe and the report by the Research Center of the European Parliament, which indeed is very interesting. But one of the key issues regarding the future, and you mentioned competitiveness and the Draghi report that we'll see next week when it will be officially presented, is the fact that we are paying energy twice as much as China or the US. And this is because it's a national competence. We don't have a European grid, so if we produce solar power in the north and in the south and wind power in the north, we cannot move it around. We don't have a strategic reserve at European level, and we are competing among ourselves for import of oil and gas rather than having one single buyer. And the European Union is the largest importer of energy in the world, so it would have a market power which is very strong in setting the price. So the result of this is that we are paying energy twice as much as our competitor. In the long run, this means the industrialization of Europe, because energy is essential to produce and transport anything. And so I think that if the pro-European organization want to push the integration forward and build a consensus, the issue of the energy union in parallel with the defense and the fiscal union is really essential, because people can easily understand the cost of I think that we should start speaking about the cost of national sovereignty. Do you prefer to have national sovereignty on the energy and pay energy twice as much of your competitors, or give it to the European level and pay half of what you are paying now? And the same for the fiscal issue and the military issue and so on. So I think that we need to turn around the perspective and the narrative and start speaking about the cost of national sovereignty, besides talking about the cost on Europe. In the meantime, Brando Benifei has managed to join us, solving his technical problems. So we are very happy, Brando, to have you here with us. Daniel Freund was with us in the first part of this session, and we are very happy now to have Brando. I think you've listened some of this discussion after you joined, so I'm very happy to give you the floor, as we have been discussing the prospect for the European Parliament to bring forward the attempt to start a treaty reform in new context and geopolitical context. Brando, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, Professor Castaldi, and also greetings to the other speakers. I will bring just a brief contribution to this debate that in fact is quite timely, because we are at the beginning of our new term, and the new European Commission will be formed in the next months, and the direction of Europe needs to be debated and decided. I will be very frank. I think that today the only hope for the revival of a path towards reform, and to also continue in the direction that has been debated and designed by the debate in the Conference on the Future of Europe, also to consider a continuation of this kind of experience, is to find a way for the main political groups to find a compromise on how to proceed, because without EPP, I say that as a socialist and democrat, I don't think we can find enough traction in the European Parliament, and in fact also in Council, to move things forward. So I think that it will be very important to do a real political work, so to discuss in depth, to find compromises, to find spaces for an advancement of an institutional reform agenda to take place. Because in this parliament, compared to the previous one, that's my opinion at least, the basic pro-reform forces are weaker. The liberals are weaker, and the pro-reform part of the liberals is weaker. The Greens are weaker. The SD is about the same strength, but that's not enough. And EPP is divided on this topic. So I think it's very important that we link to also an ambition that von der Leyen has put in place in her speech to launch her bid to reform a new commission, to actually deal with treaty changes, to deal with enhancing democracy. It will not be easy, because I think that the political instability in Germany and France will hinder this path forward. But I don't see any other options. And in fact, this needs to be coped with in parallel with a bold action by an avant-garde in the European Parliament to signal the risks that we have. I say that because I'm part of the board of the Spinelli Group. I've been the president. I think that we need an avant-garde of European parliamentarians that are able to signal the risks of these paralysis, of these having a business as usual European Union. That's not something that we can endure as a continent. I think that if we think of what's going to happen also with the elections of the United States, and with the growing geopolitical tensions, it's very complicated for Europe to stay as it is today. And as you know, the enlargement process will never continue without reform. It's obvious by someone. I can say that being in the institutions already for 10 years, I think I have enough elements to say that with the system as it is today, enlargement is impossible. And this is something we cannot stand, that we just postpone again any form of enlargement of the Union, knowing the situation in the Balkans and with the eastern part with Ukraine, etc. So this is the situation we are in. It's not easy. We need civil society, academia, organizations to push on the governments, push on the parliamentarians. And I think we need to do our part. I hope that we will be able to do so, because I think that we need that, and we need more citizens' participation. We need to build forms of direct participation of citizens to the debates of the European Union. So in the continuation of what we have been doing with the Conference on the Future of Europe, with permanent citizens' assemblies, we will need to discuss this in the European Parliament in the next months and years. And some of the issues I raised, we need to bring them into the hearings of the commissions, and try to use all our leverage. Thank you very much. I hope I gave you a few food for thought for this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brando, for being with us. I would like to give Antonio the floor for closing remarks, as he planned to also put forward the issue of the Spinelli Group, and definitely this is a crucial element also regarding the action of the European movement and the Union of European Federalists that usually have a strong cooperation with the Spinelli Group.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we already discussed a lot. Actually, I also very much agree with the points you made, Roberto, before, and I think that the role of the Spinelli Group is always going to be important, and I think it's going to be important if it will have the flexibility to, on one end, be able to work on the big ambition of a reform to be open as much as possible, and for the parliament to support it, to build this support in the parliament, but also on the other end to be able to works towards it. It cannot just be a consistent request that might just fall in the might just then fall, you know, is not actually listened or followed up in the next few years. I think that it's a season where we need to hurdle to get what we want. I'm saying as a broader pro-European and federalist family and organization. And I think this is a bit the message. And I think all the analysis that have been made are all there or true. And I very much hope that the first things actually to get lost are these veto systems. But again, also on there, the discussion, I think, is structural. It's not just about the rules that we have in the European Council. Anyway, I mean, I think that we got to the answer. I don't want to talk too much. I just think that moments like this are important also to highlight which are the topics in discussion, and to share ideas and analysis so that then they can be translated into practice. And for sure, the European movement, the European Federalists, the Spinelli Group and so on will keep cooperating also with and hopefully with civil society and organizations like, of course, universities, magazines, think tanks, and so on, to build up pressure in the European Parliament and towards the government for a much needed reform of the European Union in order to face the challenges that we have. The last thing I want to say is that we should start having a bit more of a positive messaging instead of a negative messaging. Stop saying that if we do not do this, everything is going to crumble, because from this point of view, the paradox is that Europe has pretty good resilience, but on the other end, I think that we should clarify what are actually the benefit, what we are losing. And from this point of view, I think, Roberto, you made a very good point, going more in depth in the cost of non-Europe and so on and so forth, in terms of saying, if we do this, we can have this benefit. Because I think that the narrative of we only have one choice has been actually a bit detrimental, and is being used by extremists who are trying to harm the European Union, or who are against the European integration. And it's also harmful for democracy, because democracy is based on the possibility to choose. So clarifying what's the choose, and clarifying what are the two options, and not just saying one, we need to necessarily to do this, otherwise everything crumbles, could actually be a good exercise to do in the next few years, of course, on the base of everything we already discussed.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you to all our speakers for this session, to the colleagues and students who have been here in presence and online. I'm very happy to close this conference, which has been plagued by the bad weather of these 2 days, which have produced cancellation of plane, trains, delays, and all kind of unlucky situation that could plague a conference. But we survive all of these. I'm really thankful to all the colleagues and friends and students that participated, notwithstanding these difficulties that in these 2 days we had to face due to the flooding in the area and everything else. So thank you so much for being with us for these 2 days. And we can now close this first conference of the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence Future, devoted to the follow-up of the conference of the future of Europe. We'll have another one next year, together with other activities that the center organized, smaller one, not of an international character, but more devoted to our university community and to the local community in Italy that will be involved as a campus university, as an online university, as many seats around Italy. And also the activities of this Jean Monnet Center have been taking place in different cities, precisely in order to exploit this character of a campus and bringing into the debate on the future of Europe people in different cities, in different areas of Italy, trying to put forward our mission as a center of excellence to bring the debate about Europe, not just towards the academia, but also to the broader community. So thank you so much for being with us so far. We can now close this last session of this conference, and the appointment is for the next events of the Jean Monnet Center. For the eCampus community, you will receive our monthly newsletter with updates about the center activities and of course, a resume of the conference, but also the planning activities for the next months by the center. So thank you so much for being with us, and the conference is closed.
That was the best.